Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Iuliia Mendel. She was the spokesperson for Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky from 2019 to 2021. She is the author of a memoir about that period called The Fight of Our Lives, My Time with Zelensky, Ukraine's Battle for Democracy and What It Means for the World. She joins us from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Thank you very much.
Mark, thank you for having me.
In a very recent interview, Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to negotiate directly with Vladimir Putin. Quote, if this is the only configuration in which we can achieve peace for Ukrainians and not lose people, of course, we will go for it. What do you make of this declaration by Volodymyr Zelensky? Is it a major change for Ukraine's president?
Mark, the latest statements by President Zelensky show the shift in his attitude and vision of how the war is going on. Actually, in the recent months, we see definitely a lot of changes at the front line and geopolitical changes and the changes with the relations with our partners. So it's obvious, and I think it's a very realistic approach to say that, we perhaps cannot win this war just militarily, and we need to think about our people. So, it's clear that not for the first time he mentions that he thinks about potential negotiations and he wants to be the leader in this process. So these are like the first statements that show that President Zelensky focuses more on kind of how to achieve peace under current circumstances, or perhaps ceasefire, not just the peace that can be long-lasting and can bring all the justice that was talked about earlier. This shift perhaps is very much justified from the point of view that many more civilians are looking to a kind of ceasefire, and that the frontline situation at the front line is quite bad today.
Right. The response from the Kremlin this Wednesday those are empty words because the Kremlin says, and it has said before, that because there was a decree dating back to the beginning of the war banning negotiations with Vladimir Putin, this is invalid. What do you make of the response of the Kremlin? Do you think that Vladimir Putin is ready to sit down with Vladimir Zelensky, or does he actually prefer to sit down with the new U.S. President Donald Trump? And this is why Vladimir Zelensky decided to make this offer?
Well, I think that the kind of unusual negotiations has been ongoing for some time already. It's not like the negotiation of traditional way that we're used to, when the leaders sit down at the table and talk, and when the negotiations continue afterwards. This is the kind of media type when Ukraine and Russia both try to present their demands and what we want, and both of the countries present something very far from the reality. Russia's demands are very bold, very aggressive. They want to have 5 Ukrainian regions partly occupied by Russia, and they want to lift sanctions. Ukraine, at the same time, wants to be invited to NATO, and we see that, the West is against this position. But this is like, what two countries want up to now, and this is from where both countries can start some kind of compromise. Obviously, Ukraine insists that we need to be in the midst of these negotiations. The negotiations cannot start without Ukraine, and President Zelensky wants to show that he wants to be the leader of these negotiations. But the United States, obviously, today have very huge involvement, and obviously this is the United States that will now push for the process of ceasefire. Donald Trump tries really to negotiate with both sides, tries to hear, and I'm not sure that these negotiations are going to be fast, and I'm not sure that they are going to be easy. We need to understand that the situation is very complicated, including the decree that you mentioned. But I must say you that being here in Ukraine and talking to different political parties, I see that there is some kind of preparation for elections. Nobody knows, is it going to be presidential election first or parliamentary election first? Nobody knows how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, but definitely different political forces are preparing for some kind of electoral race.
Right. But does this mean that Volodymyr Zelensky feels that Ukraine cannot win this war on the battlefield? That indeed Russia has control over several regions, and this will remain so in the event of a ceasefire. And so you would find yourself with a situation like you have between North Korea and South Korea, for example.
I wouldn't put such question. It's a smart one. However, the situation is more complicated. Let me say that Russia wants to lift sanctions very much, and I feel that sanctions can be a very good instrument in these negotiations about the territories. Let me also remind you that Ukraine is controlling part of Kursk territory that also can be the reason to exchange the territories of Ukraine. But what I see today is that people are more in focus than the territories, and dealing with the fact that Russians have huge fortifications on the battlefield, and that for many reasons they are having a lot of advances, not only in Donbass, but also in Kharkiv region. And also they are controlling taking under fire control more territory from liberated Kherson. Situation is so much complicated. People are exhausted, civilians, the army is exhausted. Obviously, Russia has more people. So perhaps it's really smart to understand how to use different approaches like diplomacy, let's say so, right? To figure out how we can find some kind of a solution. Because everybody talks that if we stop the war, Russia will become stronger. Russia will renew. What about Ukraine that has less people and less resources? If there is some kind of a ceasefire, we can build fortification that we had not built before the war. We can restore our economy. We can restore our democracy. We can try to return people back, and that will make our society and our army stronger. So the thing is that continuing on this war of attrition actually is making us weaker, and it's becoming more and more difficult to win this war by continuing only the fight. What can help us win strategically in years to come is actually to make some pause, to restore, to become stronger, and if Russia attacks, again, if potential Russia attacks again, then we will be much stronger than we are now.
Right. I mean, this is what you wrote in a recent essay in Time magazine. The title is quite explicit. Ukraine needs a ceasefire now, and you write that the war is draining us to the core, that military victory is no longer attainable. This means very concretely that Russia would retain control of the territories it currently dominates, and also that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO, because we know those are the red lines for Vladimir Putin. I mean, does this mean that now President Zelensky is ready to concede those very crucial points?
We have been negotiating the invitation to NATO for the last 3 years, Mark. And as you see, there is definitely opposition from many members from NATO. And in fact, it's understandable because NATO is afraid to escalate the war further. So up to now, to be frank, I don't think that it is realistic to exchange so many lives of Ukrainians and actually to put under existence the Ukrainian nation for illusion that NATO will invite us at some point, right? But let me say today, the third part of Ukraine is the hell. I don't know any other country that would be able to exist with so fragile economy, with so many demographic and societal changes in such a huge and active phase in war, where the third part is a huge wound for so many years. Russia is occupying around 20% of Ukraine, but it's actively shelling around 8 or 9 regions of Ukraine every day. hugely with artillery, with drone safari on civilians, with aerial guided bombs, with missiles, with everything that Russia has. You cannot imagine what it means living in those territories. So
Iuliia.
many.
Yeah, let me just ask, because one survey found that 38% of Ukrainians are willing to accept territorial concessions in exchange for peace. Do you believe that actually it's more than that, and that a majority of Ukrainians are actually in favor of such a deal?
I do believe that. I do believe that this is the latest survey. It's very brave to say that. So I admire those people who recognize that in the survey. But I'm talking here to different people, including from those regions that I mentioned that are undershelling. And I hear only one thought there, that people are eager to have ceasefire under any circumstances. And what I see on the West, there is the coverage which is very one-sided. So my point of this article was to show different conditions in which people live. And I think this desire of the nation will also be some kind of a push for President Zelensky to see other ways of continuing this war. And I'm not talking that we are becoming friends with Russia tomorrow. This is like simply impossible, right? And the negotiations will be very and very difficult. But the country needs to go further and to leave. Right now, we are looking at those shootage. This is like everyday life. Everyday life. And this is terrifying. Also, let me remind that last year at the end, there was another survey, and 52% of Ukrainians agreed for a ceasefire according to that survey. So it's obviously majority of the people who definitely agree for ceasefire. The conditions should be established by politicians and different political parties.
Iuliia Mendel, thank you very much for being our guest here on Tête à Tête from Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And thank you all for watching this show.